I don't know, maybe a timeline and an understanding of. We've talked in DMs a little bit, and people should be showing up as we go. But we'll start it off here. You ready to go?
Yeah, 10-4.
All right. So I'm Desmo. We've talked in DMs a little bit, and just mainly here invited you to the space to try to get you to just sort of clear the air about, like, I don't know, maybe a timeline and an understanding of where you got where from your own words out into the ether, right? From what's been going on and what's happened to you, your experience, how that's affected you from your business perspective, as a personal perspective, and then sort of just going that for with folks, right? Um, there's a lot of, I don't know, from what I've seen. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of days, sort of reading all the stuff that's been put out there in Medium, on Reddit, and You're Asking Me Anything. And then I've listened to Pavel's podcast, where he talks about you a little bit. Some of the stuff that was mentioned about Burleson and some of the other various areas where you talk about, and and then I've talked to just other people about what they perceive you're trying to convey is, and then it just seems like there's a lot of disassociated information out there that sort of obfuscates what you're trying to say and what you've experienced. And so I just wanted to get a space together to really just lay that all out for folks. So what I'd like to do is, I've sort of put together some notes based off of what I have read and seen, and a very high level summary. I'm gonna go through that. It's not very long, of what I, from my understanding of everything that I've read from the information that's out there, about what you've experienced, what you've done, where you're at, and what you're trying to accomplish, or not necessarily trying to accomplish, but where you're at this point in this process that you've been going through. And then I hope to just talk about it a little bit. You can correct me where I'm incorrect on some of this stuff, and then we can open it up to the panel and have some folks just ask some questions, and maybe some clarifying stuff going on here. So I'll start out with that, if that's okay. Do you have anything you want to say before I get started?
Yeah, just real quick. I think we can all agree it's a complicated story. I mean, you're talking about over decades, and really there was a lot going on about me, but folks didn't know because they didn't know who I was. And then as we'll get into it with the whole Tim Phillips flap, that kind of brought me out. And my story is completely different. And my circumstances are completely different. But what I want to say before you get going is, uh, some of the folks that did and cover this, did try and do some podcasts or the Medium article, or even the Reddit write up, was all just them trying to relay information. I didn't write or produce or anything like for any of those. So there was mistakes. It happens. That's much different from what we're going to get into with Tim Phillips. And so, like the Reddit, harsh, I think a little bit, not because it was just they were trying to summarize a very long story short, so it can be kind of blunt. But I just want to acknowledge that nobody within the medium or things that they got wrong on podcasts or out the or malicious. It's just, you're trying to cover a story. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got a family, and some things came out wrong. And again, that's why we're here today. So after that, I'll let you get going. But don't tar and feather anybody that got just because that sort of stuff happens.
Oh, certainly not, man, and I appreciate that. That's why I sort of took. I read those. I read everything I could find about you, that's out there, and I put it. I very summarized it. I boiled it down to meat and potatoes, is what I like to call it, and then I want to read this out, or I want to go through this with you to just see if I've got sort of the right understanding, because I think there is a lot of confusion, and I think it's because you have a lot of folks out there that are trying to cover the story, and maybe approaching it and hearing things differently, and interpreting things that are said differently. And so I'll go ahead and get started. This is, like I said, it's not too long, just a few paragraphs, and then then we can go on from there. Feel free if you would like, while I'm going through this, to jump in and say, hey, let's clear that one up a little bit if you hear that I've got something wrong or incorrect, and we'll go from there. So to start, based on various podcast statements and spaces I've reviewed, personally listened to, and participated in, this is the conclusion that I've come to. Your associates and yourself have acquired a high quality video and photo evidence of the Triangle Craft. The media of the Triangle Craft was acquired utilizing technologies developed outside of typical government funding means and is proprietary in nature to your company. However, it has potentially been sequestered via the Invention Secrecy Act, or threatened sequestered via the Invention Secrecy Act. This is preventing public disclosure, use, and preventing your company from having a customer outside for the technology outside of the U.S. government. Your company has invested millions in development of this technology. This technology was developed after analysis of a piece of a triangle craft fell off, and during your firsthand experience with it, roughly 20 years ago. Um, since that first experience, you've had a second experience facilitated by the utilization of your technology, and that allowed the creation of the media that has been presented to Congress and various other places, Aero Congress or wherever you've given that to. Based on Rhett Burleson's comments in the space that he had, that I was actually in and listened to, he personally stated that he has shared this media that you've created, that you've presented to them, with people that would be in the know of the veracity of what you have recorded and prevented, and that they were sort of shocked by it. So they were surprised that you were able to do this, being out from outside the government, and that you were able to present this as and detect these things. Um, and then let's see. My understanding is that your company has developed the technology that can detect either the propulsion systems of these craft, the active theft countermeasure systems deployed by the craft, or all of the above. That's my guess. I don't know that for sure. I don't think you've been very um, public about what your proprietary information or technology is, and I don't fault you for that. So, based off of these things that I've said here, I think that this is a very high level summary. It doesn't go into your arrow stuff. We can talk about all that and your Tim Phillips stuff. But do I have sort of like the history at a high level sort of nailed down? Was I misunderstanding any of that?
Well, let me just add to it a little bit and see if I can kind of help. So there's a lot covered there, but I'm going to give a very short kind of add to it, which is that this is something that was not planned. I was actually the VP for a publicly traded company, and then started to move into this company the more and more that we got advanced. It was no different than any company. You start small, and then as you make advancements, you put more money into it and you put more time into it. And so this was a business plan. Um, Tim Phillips on one of his other podcasts, after it came out in one of the articles or podcasts, did mention that it's a father and son team. So we're the co-founders of the company. My father, back when we had a space program, built for the space program, and plenty of the things that are involved in aerospace. And that's most of our team. Somewhere in there, it does mention it. They started calling us the Space Cowboys when we go into the skiff, because we essentially got enough guys we could launch something into orbit um, if we wanted to, pretty much from some of the programs we've been in. So that's the sort of team that has worked through this. I think on one of the only spaces I've really done, there was some questions asked, and I'd kind of mentioned to someone, I have to apologize who it was, about how some of our systems work. Our four categories, if we would be an ITAR, which we're not, we did pull that, would be radar, stealth coatings, power sources, and weapons. And so that's kind of when I start getting into clarification about where I have to stop. But the radar, as we're going to call it, is what makes this possible. And it started as any radar, started as an algorithm, right? You have to see how much data you can get. And then if it happens again twice, then you can probably conclude you've got some stuff to go to a step two, or whatever's in the air above it and the time and, so on, the stuff and algorithm, you're at least on the right path. So this is what's been developed over decades, over and over. The piece of material, as everybody knows, knowing what you're looking for, and the signature is always a big key. So that got plugged into it. So we've developed essentially a pull down the information you would pull down from data links, and the idea of how the navigation works. But that's also some of the reason why we don't release the GPS coordinates and the date timestamp. Arrow and SSAI has all that, but doing what we did, someone else, and I don't mean UAPX, but somebody else on the other side could do the same thing. So with that said, I'll just kind of end it with the amount is approaching 3 digits times we've been able to do what we did as far as locate the craft. And the particular 4K video was something that was requested, went through SSCI, the crystal clear, and what they wanted. So that's where that comes from. There's different qualities and whatnot, but we don't deal in blurry photos or flashing lights in the sky. So I could talk for 4 hours about one thing, but that won't get us going where we want to go.
So you've brought this up to various places in Congress, right? The SSCI and the House and Arrow, being the DoD. Is there any other area, any other places within the government that you've had to present this information to, or are those pretty much just the big three right now?
Well, when we developed this as a non-traditional company, we tried to, because of the level that we were at and the information that we had, we did try to direct sell essentially the military and the military components. That only put us in the investigative seat of all the very different agencies, whether it be NCIS. They ran us through Cyber Command in case we hacked them and got the coordinates, and that's how we knew where stuff was at. And we went through the works, and then because of the treatment that we had and because of jurisdiction, we ended up with FBI and Department of Justice. Department of Justice did clear us on the spot, so I want to make that very clear before we continue. And basically said we have a right to have our business and sell to the government, even though they may like what we can do. And so, because of that treatment that we got, I did reach out to both the armed services on the Senate and the Intelligence Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And when they happened to hear UAP is one of the many things we were speaking about, and so that's where that kind of starts. I had already approached the DoD. The DoD got back involved when we went through the Senate Select Committee. Of course, so did Arrow, and so did even some IC components. We were already dealing with a government funding expert before we Committee on Intelligence, who was with us through the whole thing. That group is still with us as we visited people like Burleson. So hopefully that answered everything for you.
Yeah, can you touch on any threats of your technology or your proprietary information having being subject to the Invention Secrecy Act, and like has that actually been activated against you, or any of that, or has that just been in your experience over the last little bit, just threats that you've had, or veiled threats that you've had from various folks?
So it's not activated. For anybody that has had it activated, you wouldn't be able to speak about it. It's you're signing a without signing it. It's just automatic when they throw that. Yeah, can't speak to the press. I mean, it's a horrible thing. Can't tell anybody about it. So that's not active, which is why I can speak about it. Basically, when you're going through the patent application, dwell on it too much, but it's pretty Loctite. If you're an American, you've got to go to the U.S. Patent Office. It doesn't matter if you develop it overseas. It doesn't matter, if the government doesn't put any money into it. you're on a team and all you did was staple the papers. So they really look at everything you've done. And then when you go through there, it's best to go through, especially if you have some higher technology or just lower technology, even for people that may be doing that. Go through some legal that do this. Most of them are ex patent office people. They pretty much identified it right off the bat and said, "There's no way you're going to be able to get this through. They're going to seize this. You guys can do too." And then later on, I believe one of those papers floating around, and maybe in a Medium article, Senator Rounds did go and ask and confirm it with essentially the DOD, and yeah, that was what their plan been, and that was a big reason why, although we're going bad and things weren't going like we wanted, we continued on with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Because in their words, the senator's words, not everybody's got a sitting member on Intelligence Committee and Armed Services in their corner to protect them from the Invention Secrecy Act. So we're not under it, but we darn well know that's what the plan was.
Copy. So that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying the second that you were to put this in a patent space and try to market this in a public manner, it would be basically shut down. And so since you haven't done that, you're able to talk on it to some extent.
Correct. When we went through the FBI, when you deal with the government, and like I'm not an anti-government people, I'm a pretty proud person, but we all know we've got issues and problems. One of the things they try to throw with us as well is ITAR. And ITAR, which is where the whole big accusation comes that they tried to form that like we could sell it to another country, is essentially the same thing as the patent office. When you file for ITAR, it doesn't have to be a patent. It can just be IP. You got to mark one or the other. And ITAR is essentially the same thing. You can only make a sell that's approved if you have a pamphlet and you go to a trade show. You have to have everything in the pamphlet approved. To turn in all the information that shows basically how to build it and what it can do so they can analyze it and see if it can do anything you don't know about, again, so they can put more limitations on it. And then essentially you can't speak on it, or the same sort of thing. You face federal prison time and they can rack up millions of charges in you. So it's kind of a boxed in environment that we've avoided. But when you're avoiding both of those, it really does limit what you can do. I mean, to be honest with you, in some form or another, of it, but in some form or another, the final customer is always going to be the DOD IC.
Yeah, that's what I gathered from what I was reading in the articles that have been written, is basically you're hamstrung into only having one customer, and the second that you try to sell to that customer, if you do it through the patents or or anyway, you're going to have it basically taken from you, and that's what I'm gathering at least.
It's not their first rodeo. We've got some other plans. We'll get into that as we go, but that's the reason why people have trouble avoiding this, and I'll just kind of leave it here. But just for instance, like if you go into a radar, we're not even the first people that have developed a radar that they've could pick up stealth. There was a gentleman that had something developed to monitor traffic. It wasn't even aerospace, and they determined that may be able to pick up stealth fighters, and so they seized his. Uh, it's just the way that this system works. No one talks about it. The things you hear around the water cooler, but yeah, we're pretty boxed in on this.
Got you. So we've established, your first experience, as I said earlier, was roughly 20 some odd years ago, and it was a triangle shaped craft that was hovering roughly 50 feet above you, and the experience lasted about 20 minutes, and you had a piece of that craft fall off, and that helped you to develop what you've made, and then also then be able to I guess, have that experience again, and but this time be able to get some good high quality media from that. Were you able to, have you been able to retain that piece? And has it been analyzed? And were you able to retain the media that you generated in that second encounter of it? Like, has your company or you personally been able to keep that stuff?
Yeah, there's a very interesting answer to all this. Some of it I'll have to limit, but quite a bit I can speak about. when we went to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, we identified this and the piece and everything to them. When we went to Arrow, same thing. We were asked, did we have it analyzed? We said yes. They asked where at. Ready to tell you that just yet. I mean, keep in mind as we go back to the story, we went in as a business, not as a person trying to force disclosure or as a witness to something. I mean, we were a business. That's why they brought us in. So we went through it. We talked about it to them. They did make the offer that, and it does appear to be true now, that they had other people with parts, and those people had given them their piece or part, and they would have it analyzed. And when the results came back, everybody would go over the results. That seems to have actually happened to some extent with some folks, and the people would get their part back. And at no point in time in any of this were we ever asked to turn it over, or were we ever told this is U.S. property. That never came up. And so there is more than one piece, as you can imagine, over decades. They were quite interested in it. We did share information quite a bit with the Senate Select Committee on it. They were very interested in what's the big secret sauce, main ingredient, so to speak. They were very interested in doing things like taking that and matching it up and see if it matched up to any of our former or current stealth coatings and that sort of thing. It's kind of about the end of where I can go on that. But yeah, we have retained it. And Tim Phillips, of course, in his interview confirmed that we had physical pieces and physical material. Last, it's kind of how I got involved with Ivan, is when things did go downhill in such the weird way that it did. I still needed to get a piece of physical material back, and I started talking to Ivan, who knew some of the main players and whatnot in the space, and he helped me achieve that handoff to get my final piece back from them. But again, that was me leaving it with them in confidence, not they asked for it.
Awesome. So at least you're able to retain your parts and your property, we'll say, which that's good. I mean, so you've gone to the Senate Select Committee and you presented this information to them, and it sort of fell through. Can you want to go into that at all? I think that was the first step that you took, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so basically, when we contacted, the committee, um, the Select Committee on Intelligence, it was complaining about our treatment, which is, for folks that don't know, this is basically their boss, right? So we didn't contact them. Can we come in and talk to you about UAP or put on presentations? That was their doing that they wanted. And they talked quite a bit. We shared a lot of information. They developed the trust. I ended up getting their cell phone numbers. We talked, we shared information until we started feeling a little more comfortable with each other. Keep in mind, we'd already had a pretty bad experience with our legal team saying we're going to lose it and whatnot. So there really wasn't an appeal to go directly into, the committee and testify. They asked, would we please come in and do a briefing because we had the goods? We agreed to it. They also asked, will you please go to Arrow? Because they told us that none of the people coming to them were then going to Arrow. Said that's fine too. And so then we went to both of them. That would have been in May of 2023 when we finally went and visited. We've been talking to the members of the committee for quite a while before, but that was the only time I've ever physically been in Arrow's, what's their secret location that you can't tell anybody where it's at. But Kirkpatrick has said it's offsite from the Pentagon. But the rest of it was built around the Senate Select Committee. That's where I would go in and do my briefings and talk back and forth. And they were the one helping us with the happened at Arrow is we agreed that we would send all of our information that had to do with adversary countries, spies, death threats, financial offers to them for analysis, and then they do it. So that's where it kind of split. So it was never actually involved in processing the deal. We would continue to go through Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. The last time I was in their skiff was in January of this year, and we thought everything was fine. There was a scheduled conference call with the government funding folks, employees, to get this done finally, and they refused to make it. Had their own idea that they were going to. They had the top of the top people in there, and the senator himself would talk to them and had it all lined up. And the senator said this, and this is what convinced us to come in because we were kind of refusing to come in unless there was a deal there. And they basically said, we'll email you the contacts. And when it came, it was kind of a closeout letter that was like general stuff. I mean, you don't have .coms, but .mils, but it was like DARPA.mil. Good luck, fellas. And that was the end. And then they went cold. We had no idea what happened. The funding people who wanted to grab this, we had places like SOCOM that was interested in some of it, ready to go. We're all just kind of like, what the hell? And we didn't really know what happened until Tim Phillips started to spill the beans.
So you've publicly asked Tim Phillips to come out and talk to you about this, and you've given him a date. I think that's next week. You can clarify that. I don't have it in front of me, but well, I understand he said some things basically to make you to defame you, to make you seem like you're a crackpot. That what you were doing was, in bad faith towards the government and all that. Do you care to elaborate on that some?
Yeah, Tim Phillips' own biographies that he came in late, I think it was October of 23. So as you can see, I've never been in that physical location with him there. I keep all my receipts. I don't have anything that's came from him or signed from him. When he first came out with that, it was kind of odd. That's the Mick West interview. Tim Phillips is being asked about what was it like to work with the UAP caucus or something like that, and he kind of does this word salad, and then it's almost like there was some editing, but there wasn't. We did inquire about that. His answer has nothing to do with that. His answer is that he was disturbed or he was bothered by something to that effect. Some of the witnesses' claims, which has nothing to do with the UAP caucus. And then he goes into one witness, which of course is me. He's further elaborate on it as Michael, and it's a father and son team. And that we had physical material, or we had physical evidence, and I believe Mick West clarifies, and he clarifies it's physical material. And that either I had said, you're going to pay me for my knowledge, or I'm going to sell to University, and that sounded like extortion to them. And then he continues on that one of the committee member staff, based on what he was told by them, that he's not a medical professional, but he sure wouldn't want me around his family. And continues on and on and on. And keep in mind, I was in the shadows. Nobody knew who I was. And this was all news to me. So, there's massive problems with that story. Tim Phillips acts like we came in and he interviewed us and it was a one-day thing, and he said send that to the FBI, and that was the end of it. As you can see in the receipt shown, there's some floating around both on my profile and on the Medium article. That's not what happened. First of all, you're talking about 2 years of back and forth skiffs and all friendly conversations. There was no threats to turn over material. It was the exact opposite. I believe yesterday or the day before, or something like that. There's a cutout of an email, and I have the full email that came from Arrow directly that said, "Thank you for protecting this material from adversary countries. Please reach out anytime!" ! That's what my relationship was with them. I had 2 different DoD drop boxes where I turned in all the various contacts, all the various threats that were coming in. And then on top of that, Tim Phillips was there during the big one where we had one come in that was determined to be a death threat from China that came with a video of the Chinese president that was taken from a person sitting next to him. They did determine it was an unknown video. It's legit. It's him. And when I say they, I mean OSI. And so that means the person that issued the threat is sure the hell capable of pulling that off. So really bad, really nasty with what we were going through, and we sent all those in. So you know, the idea that he would make that accusation is so. When he did make it, several people within the, I'm not going to mention them by name, but within the, I'll say, community that I've dealt with through this and various staff and committee all text me and basically said, oh shit, Tim Phillips has just went on a podcast and told all the adversary countries, all the spies, all the ones that issued death threats during his time of leading Arrow that he knew about because it was all sent to Arrow, that you do indeed have physical material. Every one of these countries is going to think, how do I get it? Keep in mind, he said, over this, the chairman of the committee sent a test range. So if you'd asked, what's the easiest way for you to get technology, physical material technology, the likes of we have at the Nevada test range, and then announce it all, have it when they're already tracking me and already they members of the various intelligence community and the staffs that I've dealt with told me you are in deep shit. Everything's on the table. Kidnapping, and I had to have a talk where they explained to me the current trends of how they're basically eliminating people. Things like be careful of things that may have been wiped on your mailbox, your doorknob, your gate. That's the sort of stuff I had to go through after Tim Phillips's announcement to try and stay safe. You know, I've got young kids. And so it's so completely not just false, but insanely false. And there's receipts. One of them, I think, was in the Medium article. If not, I'll post it on my page. Is from Dr. Kirkpatrick himself asking me, will I work with OSI? Because of basically there was an offer from Chinese nationals for financial. They wanted me to stick my neck out for my country so that they could grab some uh, Chinese nationals trying to buy U.S. tech. That's the actual story. So to think Tim Phillips would go on there, tell a completely different story, and then also say that some of it came from a committee member staff was unbelievable. It shocked everybody. So the challenge is not because here on UFO Twitter we want Tim to come back and chat to us about triangles. It's not that I want him to come back and debate me about is NHI real. Some people seem to think that. It's for him to come back and face the music, not me yelling at him, me producing the receipts that this is a completely fabricated story and that for 2 years, including all the way to the end of January of this year, we were still going back and forth with them. The last thing I'll say on that is in my statement, and I don't know if it's up in the nest or whatnot, but one of the things I said is the government still wants to work. He was terminated. I still have the exact same funny people that were trying to get that pushed through on the phone, like Burleson, this done. And I come up when I talk about the plan later on how we can push this through. But false, it's dangerous. You know, when I wrote the letter to the SSCI, and I don't mean a generic letter, I mean to the legal counsel, Andy, I did all the staff members, people. I went to, you know, Odie and I, all the people I've met. I've got all their personal, you know, emails to the. I told them SSCI and Arrow getting somebody killed. I know in this community we talk about orbs and we talk about or that, but this is a different thing. This is how serious of a level we're at. What Tim Phillips did.
So I understand where you're coming from, and I totally I don't disagree with you, right? Especially, I mean, hearing all of this and sort of seeing what understanding what you're trying to accomplish. I think that that's a large part of why I wanted to have this space with you, right? Is to clear that air a little bit to help others understand sort of what your motivation is here and it's generally not the same motivation that a lot of folks that are in this community would tend to have. Now, I wanted to back up a minute because there's something in how you said that this stuff sort of played out that stood out to me. You said that initially you started out with the Senate Select Committee of Intelligence, right? And you were working with them for a couple of years. That was prior to Arrow being stood up. You started getting some kind of threats from actors, whoever they were. I don't mean, you get my point, right? You're getting threats from someone, China, whoever else. You're getting threats, and they refer you to Arrow. You go to Arrow in 2023, and shortly following, basically, you opening that door into those intelligence assets that work into Arrow, Go, Kirkpatrick, Phillips, all of those folks, right? You basically get the door slammed on you from the Senate Select Committee. Am I understanding that? That seems like the sequence of events that I'm picking up is basically you were doing fine until you went to these people, and then after you went to these people, the door got slammed on you, and you started getting slandered.
I'm
Am
gonna,
I? Have
yeah,
I got that
I'm gonna
right?
try and keep this to about 2 minutes because I know we've got so much to talk about. But when I was talking to SSCI, it was not multiple years before Arrow necessarily was being stood up. You're just talking months. And so when we did go in and visit in person in May of 23, that was the same day that we went to SSCI basically in the morning, and then we went to Arrow in the evening. The difference is that's the only time I've ever physically been in the Arrow office location versus, just communicating back and forth with them. I had a secure drop box where you drop off, your contacts and whatnot with. Everything else in person was with Arrow, or SSCI. So Arrow was only there for the national security means. But again, nothing ever came from Arrow that was negative. A matter of fact, OI would periodically check with me just to make sure I was okay, knowing the severity of what was. Um, they were nice. If I would ask for something or ask a question, they'll always answer it. Again, it was a complete blindsiding with that story. There was never we're going to get you. There was never anything that it was really the SSCI was that weird last email that didn't have what was promised, including from Senator Rounds himself, or uh, same with Arrow. There was no anything. It's just they just both went cold about mid January, and that was the end. Until then, everything was friendly and back and forth.
It's interesting. I can't help but feel like there was influence from DoD intelligence that got involved with SSCI that influenced them to end things the way that it ended with you. That's my personal take based off of what I'm hearing. I could be wrong. You probably would know better than I, but that's certainly what it seems like. And then the motivations for them to actually go out of their way, Phillips to go out of his way to say the things that he said, sort of in my own brain, right, in the way that I look at things, seems like that helps confirm some of that story because these folks do tend to discredit people that they need to have discredited, and this is a way that they do it. Um. Anyway, so going from there, right? We've gotten to
Let me
Arrow.
just jump in, and then I think we can kind of end that there. Just a couple of things. If you do read the statement, I think it's on Ivan Hanel's, and it should be on mine too, that I wrote with the challenge to Phillips. That kind of covers all of it. Now that the smoke's cleared, and I've had an opportunity to talk to some other people, I'm not going to say their names, but that kind of I've been filled in on some. Yeah, you are right. You have the right feeling. People still don't understand yet because you have different changes and stuff, but intelligence and Arrow hate all some of that in the release of information that came out about Grush, where they're going back and forth and they're like, well, we don't think you're fulfilling your commitments. You're not sending anybody over here. And well, no, you're doing it. That's really how it was. Neither one of them. the other group. It was not working in a cohesive unit like it was supposed to be, or Gillibrand started this thing out and they were going to investigate and get back. It was the absolute opposite. I mean, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is saying things like if there's a cover up, Arrow's going to be part of it. That's the relationship that it is. Many a times I would ask him this exact question. Listen, guys, who is the bad guy here? Is it Arrow? Is it the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence? Is it the DOD? Because none of them seem like the bad guy as me, an American citizen, and no one could really tell me who the bad guy was other than saying, well, it's not us. Basically, I was caught in a jurisdiction war, which if you've never been in one, it's a bad place to be. Because at the end of it, although everybody wants to use you, nobody's really ready to take you on to their side and defend you. They're just trying to win the jurisdiction war of who has the right to know what or who doesn't. So that's basically the gist of it. At the end of it, they realized, unfortunately, that they weren't going to fulfill their commitments that were promised with deals and whatnot. And a lot of it, I think, had to do talking to more people than are funny people is because it scared the shit out of them. I mean, imagine finding out that you have programs when you get into like the 22 and the 35, and I'm not mentioning those exactly, but you have programs that have racked up trillions of dollars of bills. You have things ordered for 100 million each, and you're finding out that based on some new technology of radar, they're all obsolete, some of which can be before it's built. Do you want to make a deal with this guy? Or do you just want to put the pressure on him and box him in, enforce him into the Invention Secrecy Act? And that's what they did. And in doing that, they pulled what they had promised on whistleblower protection, which now meant that I was open to what Tim Phillips did because you can't sue the government. So he did do that legally, as bad as it was, and all the ramifications that could have came from it and still could come from it. But I'm only protected under the Privacy Act now, which is why he can't say my name fully. He can only say what he's told. And every time I say something, he magically knows what it is. And then he can go that step further. So that's what's going on in my view, and quite a few other folks' view that have been through this.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a hard time getting Tim to come on too, since he doesn't have that top cover from the being a government employee anymore. He's officially retired and out of the government. So anything he comes out and says now,
Well,
definitely puts him
yeah,
in a situation where he can't say that.
yeah, that's the danger. Another, I just do want to make sure I'm clear on this. He says as a paid employee, still collecting a paycheck. He's also said that this as a retired employee. So he doesn't have a excuse to where he says, "Oh, I'm no longer working," because you said it when you were working, but you've also said it when you're retired. Like it really is a call, and I think it's a fair call out to come face the music. Bring your receipts. I also offered he could bring anyone that could back up any of his story and a fair moderator. He's avoiding it. I know multiple people have contacted him. They've got answers back. He's not taking the challenge, and that's going to be the legacy of Tim Phillips, and that's what people need to know about Arrow. Do not go. That's my final statement on that.
Dude, I'm right there with you, man. I call it Blue Book 2.0. A lot of people have heard me say it. They don't seem like they act in good faith, and that's been my position on it for quite some time. All right, so moving off of that, right? We got that backstory. You've talked to me a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish, right? From with can still right to this day with this technology you've developed and what you need. And you'd mentioned you need support from Congress. You need a congressperson to basically sign on the dotted line. Can you further expound on that so that I can understand that and anyone else that might be listening or will listen to this in the future can understand sort of what you're looking for when it comes to needing that signature from someone in Congress?
Yeah, so, and I put this in my statement, where I put that Tim Phillips has been terminated. I'm speaking in his words. This isn't me throwing slander around. This is me quoting him. And he also did say that in that letter, it said that it was in the best interest of the United States government to terminate him. My statement was it is the opposite for me. I'm still working with the United States government, who still wants what I have. The group that I work with is a very narrow bunch. There's the Valley of Death, which if you don't deal with tracking, you never heard of, but it's a real deterrent for people to get funded. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of problems. I'm not in that. I'm over in what it's kind of the invention secrecy part. There have been people able to fight the Invention Secrecy Act. Very few successfully, and the end customer is the government. Because at the end of the day, the best thing for America, the best thing for our men and women in uniform, with people like me, to get the technology into their hands. That's the goal here. Always has been, and it is right now, and it always will be until they completely, you know, go the other way. But like I said, they're still interested. I'm not going to throw too many Congress people's name in here because they can pick and choose for themselves. But our funding people have been on the phone with them. I've been present, even some in person, and they've not only explained to them how we can do this, they've explained to them that something like this would usually take a year and a half. We can get it done in 72 hours. The funds moved and the program going. The reason there's a person involved that's such as a congressman or senator is it does give me some cover on the Invention Secrecy Act. It does give me some backing. It also means that whoever that is will have access to that. Used my leverage to get it that way, meaning because someone, anyone, whether it be Luna, Mace, Burleson, or Burchett, is not on an intelligence committee or is not on an armed services committee, which is what they're kind of running into now, getting locked out, they'll still have access to my folder, which is where the answers are going to end up and be. So it's a combination of everything and get it to a folder where we're not chasing it. We're not waiting for someone to release it. We're not hoping someone answers back from the CIA in the midst of something. There's your damn answers, right? And you've got access to it. Now, there's a bit of a fight. I've got some plans for that I'm not going to go into because, you never want to say everything about it, but that's the need to it. So if we can get senator, congressman, congresswoman, whether this is their freshman term or they've been there 100 years, to do this, the money's already there. This isn't something that has to be wrote to the NDAA. It's already there. It's waiting. We have different funds for advanced and emerging technology and threats. We have OTAs, the president, whether you like them or not, and the SecDef, whether you like them or not, both have issued executive orders on rapid acquisition. This is all ready to go because they want it. They, meaning the military and places like SOCOM, we just need someone to essentially write their name on a dotted line of a contract that's filled out for them, and we're set to go.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, I'm sure that there's some other folks that may have some questions. And speaking of that, like we had talked about how I'd open this up in the last little bit to folks, and I've got a couple of people, Science Bob, that's there requesting. So if you're willing, I'm going to start bringing some folks up, and could you field some questions from them if they have any?
Yeah, I mean, before I do that, just real fast, and then whoever's first, if it's Science, we'll go with him, whoever it may be. The point of me doing this, of course, is to speak more and clarify it, but the other point of it is, if you look at whistleblower Dylan said he listens to spaces and things. No one's gonna come into this and talk unless we find a better way to listen to them. But there's got to be some sort of baseline that we put down today that shows it's possible. I'm a little more into mixing it up. I don't mind that to a point. If it wastes my time, I don't. Everywhere's got trolls. But as far as questions, if it's a tough question or whatever it may be, you're more than welcome to throw it at me in a civilized manner. You just keep in mind I can't always answer everything.
Yeah, perfect. Before we do that, I got one question. So you've heard Dylan's claim about a triangle. Um, very interested, since you had sort of an up close experience and he's had an up close experience. I'm super interested in understanding if you saw, basically you would explain it in the same way or characterize what you saw in a similar way that what Dylan did, just out of curiosity, right?
Yeah, so I never go completely into detail, and this isn't making accusations to anybody, but I've noticed that whenever something comes out, you look at something like the Tic Tac, all of a sudden that's 99% of the sightings. And so if I tell people exactly what they're looking for, then it helps me, or it doesn't help me determine when someone's telling a story and I say, oh man, I think this guy or this woman's got it. So what I will say on the Dylan one is I don't know completely what it looks like. From the description I heard, it's got lights on it that I don't know about. I haven't seen that. And it appears to be more of a flat triangle. I'll use Tim Phillips's words because it's in a folder he's not supposed to be talking about. He said that it looked like an F-117 on steroids. So in other words, it's not a flat triangle, even though the bottom may be. So, and I'm quoting the last podcast Tim Phillips did before he ran off to avoid me.
Copy. All right, I'm going to bring up Science Bob and folks. Anybody that has any questions, feel free to send up a request, and I'll try to get you up here. Hey, Science Bob, what's up, man?
Hey.
You got any questions for Michael here?
Yeah, a couple of questions and a comment or two. I want to kind of really back Michael up on the Chinese people coming after you. When I was doing really classified work for the government at Virginia Tech, where we had PSSC ice and a skiff to contain it, they were constantly breaking into my office and trying to steal stuff. And they would send students over, send bribes in the form of, we will support your research at, the $1 million level if you'll take this student. And the student would be some 40 to 50-year-old engineer. And so they are very, very active. I mean, it's to the point, just to the point that talking to DNI, CIA, and NSA, we got assigned to Virginia Tech an NCIS officer and an FBI officer. And they came by twice a week to see what was the latest stuff we had on them. Not only that, they asked us, and I took it upon myself, having done things for the government in the field before, to do operations for them against these people. And it's not, I'm not in any danger because they grabbed them up and deported them. So they already knew I was squealing on them. So it's just horrible that we have opened our doors so wide because people want to make a profit and get stuff built cheap to a country that behaves like China does, because they are fucking awful. Okay, so having dealt with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in the 2000s, where they funded a bunch of work I did, I find their staffers, or of course, the staffers are doing all the work, and the senators are the mouthpiece. And if you get the right staffer, it's a whole lot better. That's what I'll say. Anyway, so we did a lot of work, got a lot of stuff done, got technology sent all over the government and all over the world based on that interaction. So my interaction was positive. So then I left, went to Virginia Tech, and then I had some really, really good ideas that I knew the government would be interested in if I could ever prove to them that it would work. But I had Lockheed Martin and a bunch of other people stomping all over me, trying to keep me from getting it done. But finally, with a funding person like you're talking about, I worked with a venture capital firm that they would accept an NQTEL. And that's how Hawkeye 360 got going. And so sounds to me like your radar stuff would definitely garner support if you talk to the right people in NQTEL. I don't know whether you're doing that or not, and I'm not asking you to say whether or not you are, but if that is something of interest to you, I'm happy to talk to you offline to tell you kind of how we did it. Because Hawkeye 360 is now part of the national satellite constellation. That's how far it's come in 10 years. So the NQTEL was good to work with, and they exercised zero control and oversight. They bought into the idea and gave us a little seed money to do kind of the basic work, so we could go then do serious venture capital work. All right. So I want to kind of support Michael's position, given my own personal information and observations, that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and most of those staffers, they have been stomped on, silenced, and put in a box. I don't know the mechanism, but it's like the legacy program types, MJ12, whatever you want to call them, got to them and made them quiet. It's really, really gone dark over there. And Senator Gillibrand, that was all gung-ho and all that, you could barely get her to talk. And go look at Laszlo's interactions. It's like she barely is involved anymore. So I'm with Michael. I think they've been gotten to. And I know people love these people in the House that are doing these committees and so forth. And we did get some interesting stuff out of those hearings. But these are super, super junior representatives. They've got to go kiss the hand of 5 people to even get a bill in the hopper to have it be considered by the House. These are very low-level people. Anyway, thank you, Michael, and we follow each other. So I'll send you a way to interact with me, and I'll talk to you if you want to. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. But anyway, thank you for coming out and talking.
Thanks, Science Bob. LM, I see you're up. What's up, man?
Hey, real fast there, Desmo and LM, if I can jump in. I don't know if Science Bob's taking off or he's staying, but yeah, definitely let's chat off the space a little bit just to cover a couple of things he said, and I'll make it short. Is people have no idea how bad the Chinese are, and if you're listening and you're of Chinese, heritage, that's nothing against you by any means, but it really is on another level. You could not imagine the amount of attractive women who happen to live in DC who
Oh my God!
offer me their place. They run a bed and breakfast when I'm there, who have randomly texted me the amount of trips to China. I've ever been to China, and they show me the pandas, and they just, you wouldn't believe the amount of deals that are all of a sudden available for free or to pay me to go over in China.
They broke into my office at Virginia Tech once a week for 3 years.
Yeah, I believe it. The Chinese worry me, but not as much as some of the other people. Point that I don't mention some of the other groups, because some of the other groups are known and have a history to travel, and when they get to you, they mean, and that's why I was told not even to mention them or bring them up. But it is an ugly space to be in, so I'll leave that part there. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the staffers, and I got to agree with them 100%. There's a gentleman, I don't think it's a secret who it is, but he's moved into the private sector. I'm not gonna bring him back up, but if you look at the timeline of everybody's story went to shit, it's when this guy retired. Anything after the very end of 23 is nothing but fuckery and deceit and stories like mine. A new crew came in, and the new
Yeah, look, Desmond, let me go further. when Kurt McConnell left working for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, it went to shit.
Yeah, McConnell, even though he was on armed services, sat in with us, and he usually did, even on the Senate Select Committee to listen. He's one of them. There's also another gentleman, and they were essentially the two guys that were the rock. They were looking for answers. They were trying to help people, and when that went downhill, every problem you hear about has came. So I think I kind of hit on everything, but everything he said is true to a point you probably have no idea. Just lastly, I'll say this. When I used to have to go to the briefings and everything like that, in the Select Committee on Intelligence, I would have to, basically got taught how to run a detection surveillance route, leave hours before, do all this shit. And then as I got close, I would have to let them know ahead of time, was I being followed? I think I was being followed. Who was following me? So they could tell the security at the Hart building to be on the lookout, this, that. Like, that's the level of bad that it got to with all this going on.
Yeah, so look, Sue Gordon and Stacy Dixon came to visit me a couple of times at Virginia Tech. You would not believe the armored vehicles and armed people that had to come with them. It's just this people don't understand the level of exposure those of us who worked on our country's behalf for the government are subject to because of this bullshit. I was happy to do it because I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm gonna get the job done. But whatever, it's ugly.
Thank you, Science Bob and Michael. Ellen, what's up?
Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to ask the question, Michael. So aside from the hipsy sipsy razor wire battlefield that you've had to, work through, and without giving any information out, because I know you said that you can't talk about specifics, especially considering sources and methods, do you believe that Aegis and Sentient was involved with data collection and what you were talking about circa around 2005? And do you believe that those systems are still up and running at this point? And who has taken over, where has the baton been passed between those systems and to Space Force? And I know you might not be able to say much about it, or at least I'm assuming you can't, but that was my question.
Well, I can't say much about it, but it's mainly because I don't actually know. Everything I've ran into and whatnot, and I haven't really spent any time on going through that. There's always going to be somebody when you get into signals intelligence, but it kind of just comes down to where I was focusing on what the company's doing and basically staying alive. But I don't have any knowledge on that. There's always going to be somebody there, but I couldn't speak to either one of those as being exactly who.
Can you speak a little bit more about how the House Intelligence Committees and the Senate Intelligence Committees, through their staffers, as far as I understood what we were talking about, have created roadblocks and impasses that you find frustrating, or that maybe you think are pertinent? Maybe they should be there. Do you believe this is a good roadblock, or do you believe this is an impasse that is not necessary?
Yeah, it's actually a good question to ask. I'm the person to blame for why the Senate was so convinced of its drones, or its adversary, or its ours. And over the 2 years that I dealt with them, I never reached out to the House, never went through the House, never went through the UAP caucus. They didn't have a clue who I was. And so, like I say, until that staff change happened, everything was smooth going. There was, I'm not going to go to because it was a skiff, but let's just say there's a lot of even non-skiff, hundreds of pages and text messages about funding, to the point that they even had me write it up, several different ones. I mean, the idea of what Tim Phillips is saying. So the staff change is what killed us at the Senate. and then the backdoor stuff. Because keep in mind, there was no ugly ending to this. Tim Phillips references it went to the FBI. I reached out to the FBI, and I don't mean like I called and said, "Hey, am I under investigation?" From what I went through before, I've got a pretty solid contact, and they use your social security and everything else to look it up. And they basically said, "Nope, the Department of Justice decision years and years and years ago still stands. You haven't broken any law." So that was it. It was just a backdoor dirty deal there, but the staff is a major, major, major thing. The House, matter of fact, I've called every member on that UAP caucus, but he called me back. I've heard a lot of people talk, and this seems to be normal. This is also normal for anywhere, including the Senate, and it doesn't have to be about UAP. You could be calling about healthcare, schools. I mean, it's just the way it works, and it's unfortunate. Now, in my case, and I don't want to put myself on a mantle above everybody else, but I've spent 2 years at the SCCI giving them actual data, hard proof, physical materials. You'd think I'd have a little easier way of getting through the House, and I didn't. And so up there, which was this year, I just cold called, and I don't recommend it unless you have photos and pictures and hard evidence. But
so what would be your suggestion? And I'm sorry, this is my last question. I apologize to everybody. What would be your suggestion for a better avenue of efficiencies of communications when somebody's involved in this, like you, when you run into roadblocks or legitimate national security concerns, when working through RO, through HIPSI or SIPSI? What would be your open-eyed suggestion about how this could actually be more efficient?
well, and I'll end it at the very end, not right now, but kind of with the way that the plan works and what the is and what it gets around, which is a lot of this, because I don't have an answer for this. It's fixing a system of people who aren't going to want to hear things about their staff not returning phone calls or not answering. A quick story on that over on the Senate side. I would go to the office, and then when we go to the SCIF, because they wouldn't have the meeting in the office, we'd go out the back door, the back door where no one could see you and you can sneak in and out. And one particular time I was in the senator's office, a couple of veterans came in and they had information, and they had said, "We've been calling, we've called the House, we're going there next. We haven't had any luck talking to anybody. We've been calling you guys." So we came here in person. They bought airline tickets, all this and that. Spoke to the staff, gave them the folder. The staff said, "We'll be in touch with you. We'll let the senator know." These guys walked out, kind of, giving each other the slap on the back. Staff took that folder, went to the staff that was by me, who was pretty waiting for one gentleman from the Senate Select to show up so we could go to the SCIF. That guy told him to put it in the shredder. He went over and put it in the trash. The guy said, "No, the shredder." So they just shredded the fucking thing. Never made it to the senator. So that's what they think about your UFOs. I'm just being honest and harsh with people who are cheering people on who are not on your side. You need to understand that fully today. I know you think they are. So at the House, we've got a little better hope. But even at the House, I don't know how you're going to get through to these people. A last story here is, it's so bad that the military, DOD, and the IOC, when they have somebody that's developing something, some of them run into UAP. These aren't UAP people, but they're developing technology, and somewhere within fielding it, what appears to be a UAP shows up. And that happened, and it was unfunded technology, but looking for funding like me. And so the gentleman that a couple of them that I work with on funding had me talk to him, wanted me to go and look down at his program. The government doesn't even have somebody to do what needs to be done. So spoke to the gentleman. I did turn him over to a congressman because I had the congressman's personal phone, and he went in and met. But unless you know someone, which is the problem with the system, unless you're willing to go through a podcaster who's going to make it their own, there isn't one. So I know that doesn't answer your question. I'm just saying it's such a massive question that in my plan, I basically sidestepped all of it and just said, get to the bread. and not try and correct all that mess.
No, I appreciate everything that you said, and I'm pretty certain the room does as well. And Desmo, thank you for hosting this space. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Michael, a couple of other questions. So just for clarification's sake, my understanding is that you do not hold a clearance, and nor have you ever had a clearance, correct?
Correct. It's always been trying to get us to get a clearance, or let's get you guys a clearance while you're here, but we've always turned that down. So no clearance, never have.
Very smart, very, very smart move. They'll wind up owning you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That's sort of the premise of my question there. The second question I have is, how were you forced in your experiences with Arrow and or any of the House or Senate committees? Were you forced to sign NDAs?
So again, I'm gonna try and shorten it as much as I can. When I went through Arrow, the Senate Select gave me the emailed them and requested the appointment so that we could line up the schedule, because us and SSCI had a couple possible days. So we had to get one was Arrow free, and never heard back from them. So then SSCI had me email them again, but blind copy them on it. Still never heard back from them. So then SSCI called them personally, which is quite a bit different from Dylan's Tim Phillips' story. So they called me back and said you ended up in the spam folder, and nobody at SSCI could figure out how that happened. Because if you ever can imagine what Arrow's email is, it's like 100 characters. If you just start pressing random characters on a keyboard, so how that, and then it's a new email, and then why are you not checking your spam filter as the only email for witnesses to get you? So with that said, when they called, they wanted to know what clearances I had. Obviously, we told them none, because they pre-check those before you go in. I told them I want anything legal emailed me prior to going there so that somebody could look at it. When I got there, they presented the NDAs. So I feel dirty move right off the bat. You could have emailed it to me. You had my email. We were talking. So yeah, there were NDAs at Arrow signed before you can go past go, basically.
That's interesting that you can't tell your story to the government without the government telling you can't tell your story to anybody else. That doesn't, I don't know. That just shows, in my opinion, that shows the intent of Arrow being worthless. But
Well, just to make sure that's clear on that. The problem here is with me, and I can only tell my version of it is, when I went in, and then, and I think it got released, there's also a verbal, basically NDA you have to agree to when you go into the skiff, and that got released somewhere, I think through Black Vault. But everything that got read to me, everything that got put down to me would involve stuff like, once you come in here and we lock the skiff door, you're essentially removed, but as soon as we open that skiff door, your NDA is automatically immediately put back on you for the duration of your life. And I don't have clearances, so I don't have NDAs. The whole program was designed, well, not like us. Everything that happened was within the parameters of if we would have had clearance, if we would have had NDAs of programs or contractors. So it did this real mess, still have waiting on a response from the DOD and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the actual legal counsel that would sit in the skiff with me on what can I say and what can I not say, and why is Tim Phillips saying this, and can we talk about this? Because nobody knows, because unfortunately this has never been done before. And so what I'm doing is playing it safe. That's where I'm at right now. So I don't know legally, and they did say they were going to speak to legal folks and legal counsel and give us a little while. We're not sure on that, but there's nothing coming back. So that's what I'm waiting on. I don't want to, there's no reason to make a mistake now after this many decades is basically where I'm at.
no, that makes sense. Yeah. Let me think if there's anything else that I've written down that I haven't sort of touched on. Looks like I got we got Missile Man up. You got some questions, Missile Man?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? So, first question was you had mentioned that you spent millions of dollars of your own money developing this technology, but you mentioned you've never done work for the government before. Where'd the money come from?
Oh, sure, man. So, and I'll be glad to send you over the banking and checking information. So, as you heard earlier, I was a VP of a publicly traded company. No, you can't know what it is. No, you can't know my salary. Used to live in a real nice home place called Waterfall Village, but that was sold, as you do with businesses, and you keep struggling, you keep working your way down, you keep downsizing to fund yourself. My father, who used to build for the space program, who's retired, had a pretty good 401k. We also had quite a bit of land that we sold. Is there any other personal questions you need to know?
What does "it's raining like loose marbles" mean?
Missile Man, what's the point of these, man?
Yeah, Desmo, this is a waste of time for questions. I mean, if it was like an hour earlier, but is there someone that has an actual question?
I'm not seeing anybody else requesting to come up. So with that, we can. Oh, I'm sorry. What's up, LM?
Yeah, I have another question, and I know it said that my last question was my last question, but in the event of what's just transpired over the last 4 minutes, I have another question. So in your interrogatory throughout RO, were you aware of a joint complaint, or were you filing a singular complaint?
I'll admit, unless I missed it, I'm a little bit lost on that. Can you just go speak a little bit more on it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll repeat myself. Concerning RO, were you filing a singular complaint or was it a joint complaint? And I'm not asking you to reveal anybody else. I'm just, it's just a very straightforward question. Not asking you to put anybody else out there on the street with you. But when it came to the ICIG, when it came to HIPSI and SIPSI, and I think you said it was just SIPSI, not through the House. And if it even got to that point through RO, was there a representative on RO's point that addressed you and had a conversation with you as a legal attorney for the intelligence community?
So with SSCI, they have legal counsel that sits on Arrow RO. Is a little bit different. You essentially have the director. I mean, different people get witnesses get different people. I had the director. I had the OSI rep who stuck with me through all this, and then I had another member. But there's certain things NDA covers, so there was no legal. I never filed some sort of official complaint. My relationship ended with them when they just quit responding to emails. When I wrote in after what Tim Phillips said, that went to the Senate Select Committee of Intelligence members, their legal counsel email. That was my complaint. So I'm not sure if I'm reading your question completely right, but I have not sat down with anybody from a legal department of the government. The
No,
FBI.
you're reading my question correct, and that's just a little bit more like peeling back the onion a little bit more. And I don't want to put you in a compromised position at all about this. Understand? So I'm not trying to harass or dive into what you're talking about, but I'm very curious. If you could rate your experience with RO, how would you rate it and explain it?
Well, I mean, first you got to be fair here. They're not in the business, nor is the government, of making friends, right? So, when we went in, like I said, I felt pretty like it was BS when that NDA wasn't sent ahead of time when I requested it. And you're talking about being there on your own dime, right? So if you don't sign it, it's just that's it. you've wasted your money to talk to them. And, like it's a real bad look to put somebody in that. It was a very, very testy 5-6 hours. And it was going to go longer, but we didn't work for them in the skiff. But we agreed outside before everybody left that we'd do the national security. This is outside the skiff, that we'd send in all the contacts and we'd try to get some bad guys off of the street here. So with that said, it went fine. I think it's somewhere, maybe the media marco, but even Dr. Kirkpatrick, I know everybody's got the bullseye on him, wrote me a letter and signed it VR Dr. K. And I understand if it signs a Dr. K, he's your buddy or he wants to be, right? So everything seemed to be fine. It wasn't until Tim Phillips spilled the beans, which explained a whole lot, that everything changed, including his statements that he would make and has basically continued to make during his podcast.
And did that change your perception of what you thought was fine that you went through with RO? And if it did, how did it? Or are you going to reserve your experience as your experience and just let the rest be, bullshit conversations that a former director of RO had?
Well, the way I look at it, when I look at who else has come out and spoke, in almost all those podcasts, a name will get brought up of a witness or a whistleblower, and we all know those names when they say them. And I think to myself, oh, here's going to be where Tim Phillips lets loose, right? Because we know for a fact that there was a bad meeting. We know they don't get along. And what Tim Phillips will say is, oh, well, it's not in the, we decided, RO or the government, that we would never disparage witnesses from coming forward. And so, I don't know if we can find that data. What do you see, a flying triangle? I don't know if we can find that data. It is completely different because they're covered by whistleblower protection. And so the other thing I see there is, I'm the one that went in right off the bat and they said, so you think this is U.S. Tech? If you listen to what they're saying about the witnesses, you don't have to believe it, but if you listen to what they're all saying either these people are wrong, or you listen to the story about when he went to Nevada test range, sent there over me, they were all right, but what they were seeing is U.S. Tech. The only difference between me and the witnesses is I did the extra step to figure out it's U.S. Tech. And because of that, they let me have it. So I feel like the only hope you have going to Aero is if you make sure you go in and say it's NHI, and maybe it is. Who knows? I'm just saying you can't say it's U.S. Tech and then you leave. Most people said they never heard from them again. I don't know of anyone that got DOD drop boxes or anything like us. So in other words, if you have legit evidence, that's different from your story being true or false. But if you have evidence to prove something, they're going to fucking come after you. So in that case, do not go to them.
Thank you so much for your candidness, and I appreciate the fact that you entertained my questions. And Desmo, thank you for the space again.
Yeah, no problem. It's recorded, guys, and I appreciate all the folks that have come up. If there's no one else that's got any questions, Michael, I'll let you close it out with any thoughts you got.
Yeah, and I'll cut to 5 minutes, but listen, we're all better off getting along. Missile Man will come back and listen to this. I'm more than willing to talk offline with Missile Man. I think a lot of what happened is that it got off on the wrong foot. And when things get off the wrong foot, sometimes you jump back to the other, and sometimes you get off on the wrong foot and keep running the wrong direction. And that's the way it's going. I don't think anyone in the community benefits from that. So I'll more than gladly speak to him. I think we can agree to disagree. Some of the things that came up is not that he's wrong. He posted a list of rules for the skiff. It's that it's different. For instance, he posted some about you can jump in there on a Zoom call and you can leave the door open. And I get that. But that's not what happens at the SSCI skiff. You walk through bulletproof glass to a desk that has a heavily armed federal officer. There's also one behind you with a long gun. You have to have reason to be in there. You have to sign in. You have to have an escort. Skiff 219 is the same one that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence has their meetings on Tuesday. In other words, Cotton Browns and the whole bunch sitting there and listen to the world spritz of the stuff that's going on in the world that we'll never know about. You would never, ever have the ability to throw in a laptop at any time. They sweep the day before and after meetings. They have stuff, I'm sure, just for you, anyone's doing anything in there. It's a different ball game. And because the system was designed for people with clearances and NDAs, they just ran that with us. Before they close the store, they make sure you don't have any electronics. You had to leave all those with the federal officer already and get your placard number. You have to verbally say you didn't. And then when they close the door, it's like a baby being born. They close it and give the time the door was closed and remind you you're all the rules and regulations, right? Same thing before they open it. They want to make sure you don't have anything else to say because once they open that door, it's over. And the person that is doing this door, last meeting we went in, is a gentleman who, during Trump's first administration, was on the National Security Council. Now he just got nominated to take over an actual big department. And by trade, he's a lawyer. Keep in mind, legal counsel is always in there. None of the legal counsel or none of these people who served at the top ever said, nope, Michael, none of this applies to you. And that's okay. I know it didn't come out right, but when you're dealing with information that you're getting videos of the Chinese president threatening death on you about, when you're getting offers for large financial amounts, when you're talking about technology and physical material that they're sending Tim Phillips to the Nevada test range over, it's okay they aired on the side and classified everything. Now, I'm not saying that worked out well for me, but I get why they did it. So there's always got to be another option, kind of like with Snowden. U.S. spy on us? Well, the rules said they couldn't. So does that they didn't, or does that mean it happened and it broke rules and regulations, right? All those things. It just happens sometimes and it broke rules and regulations. I don't want to die on the hill, or the man die on the hill, where we're arguing about skip regulation. From my understanding, he's a respected member, got quite a bit of knowledge. So I'll just leave it with that before I go into the plan that I'm more than willing to work things out and see if we can conduct ourselves better next time. My apologies for that went down in there. The plan, which is where I'll leave it, is because we have leverage. It's been designed where we refuse to, and it allows those people we're probably going to have to lean on because it's not coming from the Senate. As everybody probably knows, I'm not a fan of the UAPDA, mainly because of the eminent domain, but also because it's written. And we have to realize that next year will be 4 years. So look who's up for re-election next year. Cotton, Rounds, Burleson, pretty much the whole UAP caucus. Their entire 4-year term, and some of them was failure to get this done. I'm not being harsh on them. I'm just saying, quit rooting them on because they're telling you they're working on UAP legislation, because it ain't working. You can't keep doing the same thing. I talked about Groundhog Day. The plan we got, if we can get together as a community and get one of these people that are supposedly claiming they want answers after they went on summer break, just so you know, that was $14,500 for 0 working days. They may not like me saying that. To sign one piece of paper, they don't have to write legislation for NDAA. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that. They just have to be willing to work with us and our funding people who do all the work, call them, explain it to them. We've already been in with a couple. We can put it in a folder. PDA rewrote to focus on that folder. It's the shortest route you'll ever have to get answers. And the answers are going to include things not about human tech, but I've already been discussions with folks that deal with orbs or the psionic assets. May not be my ball game, but we're going to give everything an honest look. Let the evidence speak for itself, and then come back as a community where we have to do, and then everybody can argue about who's right or wrong. And I'll leave it.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much, man. We did have one guy come up. I don't know if you got any other time. I know you said you wanted to keep it to an hour and a half, but
yeah, one question or whatever, or 2 questions. I mean, yeah, that's fine. Finish it off. Whatever. I mean, I'll try and hit what I can here.
Yep. Hey, Ryan, what's up, man?
Hey, so This was great, and really happy to hear some of this. But Michael, I just hearing, and sort of following what it is that you've been saying, I do have just a couple of questions that have kind of been bothering me a little bit, and I'm just curious to see if you can sort of steer me in the right direction with them, and I promise to make them quick. So looking at one of the photos that I can see that you have, and it looks like this is an old email that you have from 2023, OSD, Pentagon, OUSD Intel, SEC MA. It looks like that is the name of the recipient that you have in that email. Do you know, or are you able to like allude to what that end part is referring to? The SECMA, is that an individual? Is that just part of the an office, a designation? What is that?
I'm not looking at it, but there's nobody who would fit into a SEM or A. I can't tell you. I think earlier
Yeah,
I
so it's
mentioned.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's two separate words. So like the name of that email recipient is OSD, so Office of Secretary of Defense, Pentagon, OUSD, so Office under Secretary of Defense, Intel. I imagine that's INS, and then it says dash sec MA, so like SEC, like secretary. It almost looks like MA. But I was just wondering if you, off the top of your head, even if you knew, like, is that the name of
I
the?
don't, and it's not one of them things where I know and I'm not telling you. What I will say is, until you even pointed that out, I didn't know, and the reason I didn't know is when you see the full email, it literally is like if you took 100 characters and just went to town, your cat got on your keyboard, sort of thing. So that's
Yeah,
news to
and
me.
oh, let me just confirm. So that's an email that you received, right?
Can you tell me what it says exactly?
Hi, Michael. Thank you again for passing the numbers of those that have reached out to you. The verbal legal advisement is attached to
Yeah,
this
that's an
email.
email. Yeah, it came in from the Arrows email. Yeah.
Okay, so does that help just sort of you know um help you with remembering it all, like what is sort of cut off
Not
there?
really. And maybe
Okay,
this will clear up.
no
No,
worries,
no.
I
I
totally
do
get
have
that.
some. I want to clear some up for some people though. The way the Arrow works is there's one email. So, like for instance, if I'm talking to OSI, it's the same email. If Dr. Kirkpatrick or somebody else wants to write an email, it's the same email. And then if I ask, can you forward this or send it? And there may even be one out there floating around that says it. They'll say, well, whoever it is, and when whoever gets back, they'll read this. So anything that goes to that email, the entire team of directors will read.